that they need to fuel their body. They train at a much different level. Now, the way that athletes train, the way any professional athlete trains, they understand that they need to stay in shape all year round. And they use periodization to cycle up and cycle down. And what I try to do in the book, and what I try to do with the information I put out, whether it's my podcast or my blog, is try to get people to understand this is what the science is saying. We can look at an athlete like Brady, or we look at an athlete like LeBron. They're just an application of the science. It doesn't mean I expect my clients to be at the same level, but I try to apply the same information, because if it works for Brady to still throw bombs at 44 years old in the NFL, or for LeBron to drive the lane at 36, it can help our clients, right? It can help your clients. Your 81-year-old client can help them be a little bit fitter, get a little bit stronger today.
Yeah. Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo! Yeah, you. Wakey, wakey. Get the little sleepies out of the eyes. Get vertical, baby. We got the Impact Show fired up today. Oh, Todd, I'm feeling a little tired. I'm feeling a little old. My body's hurting today. It's cold. It's crisp. I like staying under the covers when it's a little chilly out with the football season in full gear. Yo, get your mind right. Folks, I am super fired up today. We have a special episode on aging. Yes, we got to get your mind right about the aging process. And today I want to drop some dimes about how to slow the aging process down. You know, when your mind's not right and you're like, oh man, what can I do to feel young again? So I don't have all the aches and pains in my knees and my back and my elbows and my neck and everywhere else that we may have feel that. So today we're talking to my friend Pete McCall. Now check this out. I've known Pete for over 20 years. He's a coach. He's the author of the new Ageless intensity, high intensity workouts to slow the aging process. He's worked with ACE, the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and Pete has been a researcher for many, many years, putting out great content on his blog, his podcast, and all that he does. And today, I want to talk about 5 tips to not only age gracefully, but to slow down the aging process. So let's have some fun today as you get out there and move your body. And whether you're doing strength and conditioning, you're doing some steady state cardio, or maybe you're even doing some yoga. Yes, I'm going to talk about my relationship with yoga, and I have a special challenge for all of you today. So tune in right now to Pete McCall and slowing down the aging process, ageless intensity. Without further ado, let's go to today's episode. We are back, and we are in studio with Pete McCall. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Todd. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Part two. Full disclosure, part 1, we blew up the electric in the new office because it was so darn hot in here, because we're talking about a topic that is off the hook. We're talking aging today. The last time we were here, man, this place we had the lights flicker and everything else. Like, PD, I got to make sure I read the book. Let's come back and let's rock and roll. So, folks, you actually get the benefit. Pete had to come back a second time, so welcome back.
Thank you, man. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Man, I want to talk about aging. Man,
it's going to happen. We just got just a little bit older. We got that much older just in the time we've been sitting here.
Since the last time, it's only been a couple weeks, and we're already older. Folks, right now, as you're out pounding the pavement, you're running, and your knees are squeaking, and your back might be hurting, and you're like, man, I'm getting older. First off, get your mind right. But I do want to talk about this process, because there are days, Pete, full disclosure, that I'm like, man, I gotta fight gravity. We gotta rock and roll, baby. TD, get your mind right. Here's the self-talk. TD, get your mind right. We got this. Let's go. Move your body. Motion's lotion. Movement's medicine. Aging. Can you please impart some wisdom to all of our great mind right maniacs today, our fire-breathing dragons, about aging? What is it? Why does it happen? Why are we fighting this thing called aging?
Well, nobody knows. That's the thing, Todd. You read the research and they don't know exactly why we age. We just know that the passage of time, things change in our body. Cells get older, systems get older. But that's the magic thing about exercise. Exercise is like a constant recycling plant in your body. Anytime you exercise, you're creating new cells and you're stimulating the production of new cells. Yeah. That's why when you read the research, the 2 things that they found can slow down aging are, number 1, exercise, and number 2, caloric restriction. And they're not, again, they don't understand the mechanisms why. They're collecting the data. Yeah. And you have to keep in mind that you and I are about the same age. we're in the first generation, Todd, of people who've grown up exercising our entire lifespan.
Right.
Yeah, if you think about it, when we were just getting in fitness, however many years ago, anything they said about older adults is like, oh, don't let them do that. You can't let them work too hard. You can't let them train too hard. And 20 years ago, when I started teaching indoor cycling, I would tell people in their late 40s and early 50s, I thought they were old at the time. I was in my mid 20s.
Young pups.
And now we're that age, but I would tell people in the cycling class, you shouldn't take your heart rate above this because that's what the literature said. And somebody in their early 50s would look at me like, you're crazy.
Right.
I barely feel like I'm working at that rate. So that's when I started paying attention to the fact that what science knows, what we know in exercise about exercise and aging might be a little incomplete.
Now, throughout today's show, I do want to talk about your new book, Ageless Intensity. We talk about ageless intensity. I want about slowing the aging process down, and you can weave in some of the things that you share in the book. But what are, Pete, some of the things, what are the hacks? What are some hacks that we could do? And we could dive into a few, but what are some of the hacks that people are using now to defy gravity?
Defy gravity, defy aging. Well, the thing is, when you look at it, Todd, the main hack is just exercise. Be consistent, be regular, and exercise at a high intensity. Think about HIIT training, right? High intensity interval training. We generally tend to think of HIIT as, okay, we're doing it for calorie burning. We're doing it to burn fat. But when you look at HIIT, you're producing hormones like growth hormone, insulin like growth factor. You're producing something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. It's a protein that stimulates production of new brain cells. So HIIT training, as we get older in our 40s, 50s, and beyond, HIIT training becomes a mechanism for how we maintain our youth.
Right.
And that's what the research is showing. But the thing is, it doesn't need to be 30 to 40 minutes of HIIT. 8 to 12 minutes of a HIIT workout is all you really need if you do it at the appropriate intensity.
Yep. Pete, I believe it was your first book, and I love this aspect. You broke down, depending on decade, certain movements, exercise intensities that you could do, correct?
Correct, yeah.
What was the name of that book?
Smarter Workouts.
Smarter Workouts. And it was like in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond.
Yeah.
Here's your philosophy and methodology of that. How much of that is true today? Because you see a lot of, heck, I've got an 81-year-old client, Pastor Jeremiah, and we're doing kettlebell deadlifts and we're doing some, intense stuff. How much have you seen it change based on research as far as high intensity interval training, even for folks in their 60s, 70s, and 80s?
Well, that's the thing, is the research is showing that people who've been exercising their entire lifespan. So think your pastor who's 81 years old. He might have had a gym membership for the past 45, 50 years. The modern fitness industry, Todd, is about as old as we are. It started in the late 60s, early 1970s. So really, as people have aged with the fitness industry, people have been working out their entire lifespan. There's one study that came out from Ball State University 2 or 3 years ago that looked at people in their 70s who've been exercising their entire lifespan. They looked at people in their 70s who have not been exercising, and they looked at people in their 20s. The 70-year-olds who've been exercising throughout the past 50 years had the same muscle biopsies as people in their 20s.
Yeah.
Their markers of aging were much lower.
Right.
Were very similar, whereas the people in their 70s had like lower mitochondria, lower protein density, lower enzyme density in their muscle tissue. The people in their 70s who've been working out the entire time have muscle tissue that's years, decades younger. That's what they're starting to see by people who continue to exercise.
Yeah. What I find now is after intense workouts, and I love intense workouts, whether that be kettlebells, lower body, upper body exercises, but intense exercises where I'm getting after it for 20, 30, 40 minutes plus and crushing it, is the recovery process is huge. Because there are times like, man, I'm sore for days. Well, I can't work out like that anymore. But I look at things like elastin and collagen and fascia, and I've been studying fascia since 1995 when I had a back injury. And I learned about fascia and connective tissue and how it hardens over time as we age. You lose elastin, you lose collagen. And I've been enthralled the last several years, let alone months, in overcoming a knee surgery in 2020 and trying to get my body all figured out in using collagen and using elastin and using peptides and everything else that you can do to recover. right? And whether you call it, aging or not, it's aging that we've got to make sure we do that. What has been your discovery in the research with elastin, collagen, fascia, so that we can eradicate the aging process or slow it down?
Well, that's a great question, Todd, because when you look at it, we have two primary tissues. You have muscle fibers, and that's normally when we go into the gym and you lift a heavy weight, you're making the muscle fibers stronger.
Yep.
Muscle fibers get stronger by contracting against resistance. When you look at connective tissue, fascia, the elastic fibers, the elastic tissues, they become stronger by lengthening our resistance. So that way you have your hard days when you get after a heavy weight, high intensity, right? The next day should probably be probably more of a body weight exercise, more of a multiplanar movement. That's where like the TRX comes in. And I have a couple TRX workouts. I added a couple TRX moves into the book. Randy was kind enough to send me a brand new one to use for the photo shoot. But when you look at it, and so that's the way you mix it up, right? Is you're absolutely right. And that's the thing. A lot of people, as they get into their 40s and 50s, like, oh, I shouldn't be training that hard anymore. Absolutely not. You should still get after it. But it's going to take you a little bit longer to recover. So that way, the day after that heavy workout, when you're feeling a little bit kind of tweaked, you still got to get up and go do your body weight workout with TRX. Maybe do a yoga class. Maybe do some multiplanar movements with a cable system that just challenge, because what you're doing with that, with the heavy weight, you're strengthening your muscle tissue. With the multiplanar movements, you're lengthening and strengthening the fascia tissue. So therefore, while one's recovering, you're really strengthening the other. And that's kind of how you keep the body working the entire time.
I need more yoga.
Right?
I need a lot more yoga.
Every time I read about yoga, I'm like, I gotta get.
Anyone else need more yoga? Anyone, please, right now. Yes, I know. Because here's what I do. I feel like I'm in confession right now. Is if I got 30 minutes, I'm like, I got to get a workout in. I gotta crush. I gotta get calorie. I gotta burn the stress. I gotta get my mind right. So I'll do the yoga stretching afterwards. That doesn't come because I'm out there. I feel good. I gotta get a little extra arms in or a little extra core, whatever it may be. And I'm like, I'll stretch tonight. And then every now and then I'm like, at night I'm tired. Like, that 20-minute stretch becomes a 3-minute, get into the pigeon pose, down dog, up dog. I'm like, I got my yoga in. Folks, I'm declaring right now, we need a yoga revolution. We need more yoga. I need more yoga.
Every time I do it, Todd, number one, I'm humbled. And it's always good to kind of remind yourself you can improve. But I feel so good. And if you study the fascial lines, you're like, you see how you move your body in certain positions and you can feel your tissue unwind. I don't know about you, but I feel literally my tissue unwind. And I walk out of there. Number one, I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit feel uncoordinated after watching some of the other people in the class banging the poses, but I feel like I've gotten better. And not every workout. That's the thing. The mistake we get to, Todd, is especially once we go over the age of 45, is that yes, we want to challenge ourselves, but not every workout needs to crush us. Sometimes a good yoga workout where we move, we're going to sweat, but you're not smashing yourself. That can be the best thing, because then the next day you come back and you're all cylinders.
I want feedback right now, everyone. I want to know who needs more yoga. You need to let me know if you need more yoga out there, because if you're like me, 5-6 days a week, you're moving your body. I would say do most days of the week you're out there moving the body, but we could be kinder, gentler with our bodies some days. And I want to know if you need more yoga as well, because Pete, I live with my wife who does yoga. She does it for a living. She's been a yoga instructor for 20-something years. She teaches at the college, and that's part of what she teaches. She and McKenna do yoga in the living room and during the pandemic, and I'm like, man, that looks so good. I need to go in there and join them doing yoga. I'm like, man, it looks good. And I'm like, breathing. I'm like, keep it up, honey. Get your darn tail, TD, into the yoga and that stuff. So we need that. I need that, because every time I do it, like, man, I need more yoga. So
absolutely.
Y'all probably say the same thing, but keep working, keep walking, keep working out, all these things. I think the point that Pete's trying to make is we do need to have days where we can recover as well, whatever that recovery is.
Well, mobility becomes one of the key workouts that we should be doing, right? It's like the way I try to organize workouts is you have your force production days. You're either doing strength or power. That's when you're getting after it. You have your movement days where you're doing body weight movement primarily. You could be doing yoga, TRX, just moving your body in multiple planes. Then you have your Metcon, your metabolic conditioning days, of where you either do steady state like cardio, or you do HIIT training, you do interval training, depending on how you're feeling, depending on how you're sleeping, nutrition, and everything. And so that way you're kind of, the way I look at it, remember the 3-day split when we first started working out? You had chest and tries on one day, back and bis on another day, shoulders and traps or whatever you did. How, bodybuilders kind of split
What
it
are you
up.
talking about? Do I remember it? I still use it. Now, y'all are joking and laughing. No. Yes, I do remember
but
that.
No,
yes.
but that's how a lot of us learned how to work out. So my proposed 3-day split is total body force production one day, total body low intensity training the next day, because that's like your active recovery day. And then the third day you either get after it with HIIT, or you get after it with steady state training, or you mix it up a little bit. But then that way you can work out every day of the week. You're just doing an undulating where you're doing higher intensity one day, lower moderate intensity the next. And that way you can just keep the body working the entire time.
I love it. So if you're not a fit pro and you're a fitness enthusiast, weekend warrior, and he says undulating periodization, that's a way of fluctuating the sets, reps, intensity so that you can, number one, get great results. You can actually get more strength and power. If you're a strength addition coach, we're talking turkey here, and how to moderate the volume of training and intensity of training. In Ageless Intensity, Pete talks about that. High intensity workouts to slow the aging process. Not that every day, 4, 5, 6 days a week should be high intensity. And that's the point in him with this book on doing that. Correct, Pete?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yes, we need intensity, but we also need the inverse of that, like recovery. That becomes a big thing.
So like most people who work out, when you talk about steady state cardio, a walk, a jog, a run for a steady period of time, how often do you recommend in this book that one does steady state cardio?
Probably about I'd say, because I try to alternate between interval training with one workout and then steady state with the other workout.
Okay.
A lot of it depends on your sleep and everything else going on, right? Because if you get busy at work, and let's be real, the people out there listening have jobs, they have lives, they have other things they need to do. We'd like to think that they live to train, but they don't. They have other things to do. So they have that period of time when life gets hectic and there's not sleeping as well as they usually do. That's not the time to nail yourself in the gym, because high intensity interval training requires good recovery. And if you're not getting good sleep, your body's not going to recover properly.
So are you an advocate of tracking your sleep through an Oura ring or through anything else? Not
necessarily like through an app or anything, but just paying attention to, if you get good sleep, then you get up and you can nail it. But if you're up late, if somebody your boss dumps out, hey, you got a proposal due tomorrow, or, we all have that. Or you make a cross country trip and you're off your sleep cycle for a couple of days. Just be smart about it and adjust accordingly. And so those are the days like where if you have a higher stress load at work or life, then those are the days you do more steady state training because that's less stress on the body.
Pete, in the intro, I talked about your experience as a researcher, and you've worked with a lot of the world's largest organizations and have done research with them. What is your belief on some of the technology that exists? You got Whoop Band, you've got Oura Rings for tracking, because some people like to have those objective numbers. I know even a lot of my clients have one or two of these different systems. What have you found through your research with them?
They work. I mean, right? They work. You can have some debate. I wear an Apple Watch. I know other people wear other things. And the Apple Watch, because it's taking a heart rate at the wrist, it's through a light diode and not through an electrical sensor on the heart. There's a little bit of variance in there in terms of, is it actually 100% accurate? But your day to day, you're getting apples to apples. If you're always using it, then it gives you correct data. And I think the more that people can understand about the importance of sleep, the more that people understand about the recovery, how they recover from a hard workout, the better. And so how they collect data, I think is key, because then hey, I've gotten great sleep the last couple nights. I know I'm meeting with you today for a workout. I can crush it. And I can say, hey, Todd, I'm green light. Let's go. Whereas maybe some couple things have happened. I didn't sleep as well. I don't feel 100%. I might come and say, hey, Todd, I'm feeling okay, but just know my sleep has been a little bit off last couple nights. So I'm ready to work, but just keep in mind, I might not have a full tank of gas today.
Is there anything that Pete McCall is doing these days to get better sleep?
Just trying to get to bed a little bit earlier. I mean that. That's I interviewed somebody about a year ago for my podcast of where he's like, look, if you can try to get to bed an hour earlier a night, that's like sleeping an entire extra night over the course of a week. So, whereas I was getting like 6.5, 7 hours of sleep, I'm now at about 7.5 hours of sleep a night. So all I'm trying to do is get to bed I'm trying to shut down my TV, shut down my screens a little bit earlier, because what is shown is like if you keep your lights on later, your body won't produce melatonin as early. And so that's why when the sun goes down, your body will naturally start producing more melatonin. But if you're inside staring at a 70-inch TV and you got a 2 or 3 screens going on. You got an iPad, you got a phone going on in your lap. You're keeping your body from producing melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've been reading that, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let me, can I shut off the TV a little bit earlier? Yeah. Okay, great. So now instead of reading on my iPad, I've been going back to old school, those things with pages, the book things.
My wife got me a Kindle iPad once, and I told her to take it back because I hated. I needed a book where I can I can underline things and make the little cut it on up and that stuff. So one of the things I realized during the pandemic, especially the last couple of months, my mind's always racing before I go to sleep, right? And if the mind's racing, it doesn't matter what time I go to sleep because my mind's racing. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with my thoughts, and that is trying to quiet down the mind prior to going to sleep. And you mentioned some of those different tactics, but I've shared before on the show the 3-2-1 technique of 3 hours before going to sleep, eating 2 hours before shutting down work, and 1 hour before going to bed is extreme personal care. The hardest one for me is the 2 hour mark, is shutting down work 2 hours before. I have a tough time, if I'm trying to get to bed by 10:30, is shutting down at 8:30 on that time you get home and get rocking and rolling. Is you're writing or an email or a blog or prepping for a podcast, whatever it may be. I find that the mind is a busy place, and I know many of you listening in right now could probably understand and agree, because you may be in the same situation, whether it be with your career, your health, the world situation. The mind is racing on that. So I've developed routines that I've used over the last several months to try to quiet the mind, including reading. Reading is great. I feel like I get sent a different book every other day. So I've got a lot of reading to do in a good way. It's a good thing. Ageless Intensity, your book. But I wanted to put me to sleep. You get me all fired up. I want to go out and work out at 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah, it's not the thing to read before going to bed.
No, but it obviously reading is really good for the mind. It also inspires the mind, because I want to have input into the mind and the brain that'll relax me, but inspire me, so that when I'm actually sleeping, you're actually having good thoughts. And that other one at night is, I've got a Juve wall. Have you studied the Juve wall?
No, I haven't seen those. Yeah,
pretty interesting. It's red light therapy. To combat. I think about all of the blue light. Even as we sit here, we've got blue light, phones, computers, cameras, blue light all day. Red light therapy, a Juve wall. Literally, I try to get 20 minutes, 10 on the front, 10 on the back on that. And it's just a technology to do that. Now, does it work? I don't know. It's all of the things that for me, it's recovery, it's stretching, it's doing more yoga. Did I already say I need more yoga? Part of aging. Yes, I need more yoga. But those are all different aspects that I use. What other technologies are you finding in your research that are things that are going to combat aging or just going to help improve performance? Because I'm always about, I don't think, oh man, I'm getting old, I shouldn't do this. I'm like, how do I get better? How do I improve my performance? Anything else that you're
one of the things that I write about in the book, I obviously talk about strength training, talk about power training. You mentioned kettlebells. Kettlebells are like old technology that really work. Because they're working on connective tissue and as well as muscle. And then another thing that we were just talking about before we hit record that I didn't put in the book, but I'm already looking at for the second version when I do the second edition to update it, is something called blood flow restriction. And I read about BFR a little bit. I interviewed somebody who practices blood flow restriction, and I'm currently writing an article on it right now. And the data on that is it's overwhelming. And you shared that you've been starting to play with it.
Oh yeah.
What got you turned on to that? Well, first of all, do you want to explain what blood flow restriction is?
I had a live retreat here in July, and one of the gals here works closely with a man who invented part of his it's B3 Sciences, and he said, TD, you got to use this BFR. I'm like, why? He's like, because as we get older, we can maximize the hormones that are released while exercising. So instead of doing 45 minutes of exercise, you can significantly reduce the amount of, quote, impact on your body by using the BFR bands. So I started using them 2 to 3 days a week. 2 to 3 days a week is what I use them. And they go on your upper arms and your upper legs. And if I'm doing steady state cardio, like on an elliptical, I'll do it for 4 minutes and I'll go after it. And my legs feel like they're getting worked pretty darn good. And if I'm doing an upper body exercise or upper body workout, I'll put them on the upper body and get after it. And the thing that is good about it, it's lighter weight, high reps, and blood flow restriction is exactly what it sounds like, right? And the hormones, when I say hormones, I'm talking more growth hormone, testosterone, IGF-1, all growth hormone building hormones. These are things that we want because as we age, we typically lose testosterone and growth hormone as men. Not a good thing.
No.
So we want these to be up. So this is one of the strategies that one could use and employ. Again, I'm in the middle of doing my own. I always like to use it on myself. Sometimes I feel like a human guinea pig.
Yeah. That's what we do though, right?
Supplements, if it's BFR, if it's Juve, I'm like, I'll do it. I'm like a self biohacker. But I do, since July, I've been using it. So a few months now, I will continue to use BFR and get behind it because from my own personal experience and the research I've done, it's been tremendously beneficial. Well,
here's a little secret, Todd. You know, I do a lot of writing for the American Council on Exercise.
Yep.
Anytime that I want to learn about something, like there's something that I want to learn more about, like fascia or anything, I pitch them on an article. For their online magazine. So that way they're paying me to do the research.
Yeah.
So I'm deep in the weeds right now and I'm finishing up the article, but the research on it's killer, right? I mean, because when we look at strength training, whether you're doing barbell, kettlebell, dumbbell, whatever you're doing, there are two types of stress. There's mechanical stress from muscle fibers sliding against one another. And then there's metabolic stress from using glycogen, from depleting glycogen in the muscle cells. Well, all you're doing with BFR is you're accelerating the metabolic stress because you're occluding the blood. The theory is that you're occluding venous return, the pumping out of the muscles. So what you're doing is you're keeping all that metabolic waste, the hydrogen ions. You're keeping the creatine, the byproduct of adenosine triphosphate, the monocreatine. You're keeping it in the blood, in the muscle cells longer.
Yeah.
And that is what induces the muscle hypertrophy.
And the interesting thing about that BFR, again, it's called BFR. It has been around for a little while because it's been used in the athletic training world. When I say athletic training world, in folks who have been in rehabilitation. So if you're an athlete, you go see the ATC, the athletic trainer, and they have been using BFR for years. My athletes have been telling me about BFR, but truth be told, this is the first summer with my NFL athletes that I actually used it with some of them in the performance side of things, right? So now that the NFL season is already underway, some of these guys I've worked with we use BFR as part of our performance, where in the last couple seasons or off seasons, they may use it as part of their warm up or part of an athletic training protocol. Now BFR is becoming a little more mainstream, and you're going to hear about it more. You may be hearing about it the first time from Pete and myself. It's something that I'm using. I've been sharing a little bit on my Instagram stories and obviously here on the podcast. So as it comes out, Pete, and you do the research, I want to know. So I'll have to report back to our listeners about it.
I'll send you the copy I send to Ace, like the full study. But the thing is, for years, it was you had to use something like a Doppler instrument in order to read the blood flow. Like basically to see, are you occluding the right blood flow? Because you want to stop venous return, but you want to maintain arterial flow.
Yep.
So in the last couple of years, a couple of products have been introduced to the market that are much less invasive and much easier to use. And so people, according to the research, they've been developing kind of the methodology. So the interesting thing that when I talk to researchers, it's always like, what comes first? Which is the chicken, which is the egg? Do you get the research ahead of the method, or you get the method and then people do the research to understand why it works?
Yep.
And that's what we have here, right? Is they realize that, hey, BFR, if we restrict blood flow, we get this massive growth. But they didn't really know how or what or why it was doing. And so for the last 15 years, it's been studied, and their research going back to the early 2000s. But now that they kind of have a system down, they've identified some systems. You have one method, I have a similar method probably. But and I think for listeners, keep an eye out for blood flow restriction because it's legit. And one of the things I saw was the military's even using it for some of their soldiers that have had partial limbs, damage due to explosions and whatnot in various war situations. The military has been using it with their soldiers in rehab protocols in order to try to induce rapid muscle growth. So that's one of the things where now with the book out, I'm like, Dang it, I should add it, but it gives me a
Part
reason.
two.
Exactly, it gives me a reason to do
Tell
second
me about
edition.
the book, Ageless Intensity. Let's say someone doesn't have technology or BFR bands or Juve walls. They just want to get great workouts. They're pounding the pavement. They love to lift weights, dumbbells, barbells, whatever they have. Tell me about Ageless Intensity. If there's 3 to 5 principles or thoughts that one could extract out of this from us today on the show, tell us about the book.
Well, just what I talked about. Go to metabolic fatigue. So work to the point of being fatigued. Like you say, you love to get after it. That's good, because when you get after it, that's what stimulates the hormone production.
Yep.
So theoretically, over the age of 35, men produce up to 3% less testosterone per year, theoretically. But the research, when they look at men in their 60s and 70s who do high intensity interval training or do high intensity strength training, they see that men in that age range will still produce testosterone at the same ratio as men 30, 40 years younger. So that's a big thing, because traditionally it's thought of like, well, I'm in my 50s or 60s, I don't need to lift heavy anymore. Nothing could be further from the truth. That's when we really need to be lifting heavy, because we can stimulate hormone production. And then we got to look at diet. And I don't go into nutrition too much. I'm an exercise science guy. But when you look at diet, because diet can support testosterone production as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because you said from age 35 on, up to 3% loss
per year
of
testosterone without exercise, if you don't exercise.
Okay.
That's why when you watch sports, you wonder why you see so many things for testosterone replacement therapy.
Well, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Because think about this. If someone's 50, you're 50, 15 years after 35, if you weren't exercising, 15 times 3 is a 45% reduction in testosterone.
Yeah. And then here's the kicker.
Good for
And then here's the kicker. When there's extra belly fat, a lot of abdominal fat will produce an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase will attack free testosterone and convert free testosterone into estradiol. Estradiol is a female sex hormone which promotes breast growth. That's why when you see men in their 40s and 50s that have really big bellies, they also have breasts. They're developing breasts. That's because their body is catabolizing what testosterone is producing and turning that into a female sex hormone. So the first thing, if somebody's in their 40s or 50s and they look down and go, oh, wow, fat is just stored energy, right? Let's take a step back. It's not a bad thing. It's whatever. If you have extra energy, you've had other priorities in your life. Just understand you have 2 things you can do with that. You can either keep that energy and store it, which is not good for your health, or you expend that energy through exercise. And as you expend that energy and you get rid of that extra body fat, now you can create a more anabolic environment. And anabolic just means growth. That's all that means.
So if you are exercising and you adhere to the principles in your book, mobility and foundational movement patterns, strength and power training, metabolic conditioning, you are doing this 5 days a week. What would you say in addition to this nutritionally? I know you don't address it in the book, but what would you say are 2 or 3 things that one could do to make sure that they increase their testosterone and growth hormone from good nutrition? What are some principles that you would share?
Well, no, that's a great question, because when you look at, testosterone, one important component of testosterone is high density lipoprotein, HDL cholesterol, right? So we need to eat stuff that's good, that has good fats, the poly and monounsaturated fats. We're here in Southern California, so what do we eat a lot of? Avocados. Right? Avocado is really good for that. The cold water fishes, salmon, you have mahi. So get those fish tacos, grilled fish tacos. Let me emphasize that, grilled fish tacos. But it's looking at where can you get healthy fats, because that healthy fat is an important component of testosterone. And so that's what you can do. Then you can look at a lot of the saturated fats, a lot of the fried foods that can increase your LDL, your low density lipoprotein cholesterol, and be bad for you. And the way I try to get people thinking about nutrition when I talk about it on my podcast is be a good B student, meaning you should do about 85, 90%. Like a B student's a good 85, 90%, right? They get everything right. They're not the geek and everything right. But for those of us that enjoy every now and then having a pizza or every now and then having a burger, be smart about it. That becomes an occasional thing rather than a regular thing. And that's where it's like, I heard a great piece of advice from, this will surprise you, a guy named Tony Horton a number of years ago. He was on Jim Rome's show. He was promoting some new product, but he was talking about give yourself once a week, give yourself a cheat meal. Not necessarily a cheat day,
Mm-hmm.
but like a cheat meal where you might order fries you don't normally order.
Yeah.
Where you might have a pizza with the kids or something like that.
Yep.
And that becomes, because as we get older, one of the things that happens is we're just not active as much anymore. That's what they see. And so what happens is we don't expend that energy. And that's the other reason why it's so important to do strength training and high intensity training as we age. Because somebody in their 60s and 70s who walks every day, who maybe does low intensity exercise or water aerobics, they're working their type 1 fibers. They're getting aerobically fit.
Mm-hmm.
But what burns carbohydrate? Your type 2 fibers.
That's right.
And so somebody who still walks every day could be at risk of developing type 2 diabetes if they're not doing anything to stimulate carbohydrate metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
And carbohydrate metabolism means work to the point of being out of breath.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the big takeaways. That's one of the big things I realized in writing the book was like, we get older, we need to use carbohydrate metabolism. And that's important to me because my grandfather lost both legs due to diabetes in his later years. I write about this in the beginning of the book, is my two grandfathers, one fell off rigging he used to work in a factory putting planes together during World War II. He fell off a rigging, had a really bad back injury. So when I was young and I saw my grandfathers in their 60s and 70s, my one grandfather walked every day. He would come home from his walk, he'd do his push-ups, do his sit-ups, and he was pretty active for being somebody in his 60s. My other grandfather had a bad back injury and he just wasn't that mobile. It was painful for him. And as a result, that grandfather, my maternal grandfather, ended up having both legs amputated as a result of diabetes. And he had grown up being very active, but just and he had an injury in the 1940s when they didn't really know how to fix it.
He was type 2 diabetic.
Type 2 diabetic, but they ended up, because he was very immobile, they ended up amputating both legs.
Wow.
Because of just the way it affected them. And that's one of the other things that really got me into this. Like, okay, why did one grandfather age so differently than the other grandfather?
Yeah.
And just kind of trying to understand that a little bit differently.
Pete, in your book, page 107, Strength and Power, Exercise and Workouts. If one had to get the most bang for their buck, what would be your top 3 to 5 exercises, strength exercises, that one should do their best to include, as long as they don't have any medical conditions that would prevent them? But what are the big exercises that you think most people should try to include in their program if physically possible?
And this is going to sound a little funny, and I've totally changed my thought on this. Our colleague here, part of the San Diego Fitness Mafia, Brett Contreras, created the hip thrust, right? Of where you lay on the ground, you put the barbell on your hips. And I used to think, Todd, that was a pure Instagram booty model exercise, right? And Brett trains fitness competitors. That's where he really got it into. But I wrote an article again. I wanted to learn more about it, so I pitched an article. I wrote an article on the hip thrust a couple of years ago. And what the hip thrust does, it's the best way to keep the glutes under tension for the entire range of motion without compressing the spine or the knees. So for you've had knee replacement, I've had back surgery. So for some people like us, where we want to lift heavy, but putting a heavy bar on our back for a squat just doesn't feel good anymore, going heavy on the hip thrust can really develop hip strength. And we both know that hip strength is the foundation of a solid core. And so the hip thrust would be one of those key exercises that guys in their 40s, if you have bad knees and you're in your 40s or 50s, don't not do lower body. The hip thrust allows you to go heavy. It'll take some time to build up to that, but then you can start getting there and doing 405. You can start moving heavy weight again. You're just doing it in a slightly different manner.
From a research perspective, how does that compare to the hex bar deadlift? Do you know? Because I love the hex bar deadlift. I really, it's one of my favorite lower body exercises is the hex bar. Any research on the EMG between a thrust and
there was a study published. I'll see if I can find it and send you a copy so you can see it, that compared the hex bar deadlift to the RDL and I think to the hip thrust.
Love it.
Because when you're at the top, but think about it, if you're at the top of a hex bar deadlift and your hips are at full extension, the load, you're carrying the load as a vertical compression on your body. But if you're laying on your back and your hips are fully extended and the bars across your hips, the glutes are fully extended with the maximal amount of load on them. That's the primary difference between the hip thrust and a squat or a deadlift, whether it's hex bar or otherwise. Is a squat or deadlift, the hips are fully extended from a vertical position, so the glutes aren't really under contraction. Whereas if you're laying on your back and you go into full extension with the hips, the glutes are under full contraction with the maximum amount of load on them. And that, according to the EMG studies, is where the glutes are lighting up as opposed to like when you're standing up with a bar on your back.
Right.
So keep doing the hex bar deadlifts, but understand it's not going to be the same exact force output.
We're in the weeds here, folks.
Yeah,
I hope you like it because it doesn't matter. Just get one of them in. I know in working with athletes, I like them on their feet. I like them also doing complex setting where they're doing a squat or deadlift type movement, and then along with a complex set, which means you take that strength along with a plyometric. Now, these are typically high-level athletes or even young athletes, but what we're talking about a senior athlete, which we've got the senior games here at Fitness Quest 10, is depending on orthopedic conditions as well. We might not be doing plyometrics, right? Like I don't do a lot of plyometrics these days with my knees. So bottom line is work your lower body, and there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. The barbell deadlift, the hex bar deadlift, the Romanian deadlifts, the hip thrusts are all different ways. Because when you think about your body as a motor, your glutes, your legs, and your back is where the money's at. So I always tell my athletes, the money's in the motor, and the motor's in the glutes, the legs, and the back. And even though we all like bench press, I know guys, you're like, oh, your ears just perked up, like arm farm and bench press. I get it. I got it. But if you want to make sure you change your body and work the smart muscles, your glutes, your lower body, and your back is making sure you got to make sure you work those areas so that you can maximize your gains.
Well, the perfect complex in that would be like a heavy hip thrust followed by kettlebell swings.
I love it.
Right? Because again, in a good kettlebell swing, your shins are relatively vertical. You're not compressing the knees and you're exploding through the hips.
Yep.
So I'm a huge fan. So the workouts I have in the book include barbells, like the deadlift, the RDL, the barbell hip thrust. I have kettlebells in there. I have swings. I have kettlebell snatches, the swing snatches in there. I have split leg squats,
goblet squats.
Yeah, the goblet squats. And look, I used to love, like at the end of it, when I was on my D3 college football team. Notice I said on the team, not playing.
What school was that?
Redlands, University of Redlands, up the street here. But my buddy and I, Chris Hodson and I, we would put 225 on the bar and we'd rep out as many as we could to squat to finish the squat workout. Usually meant one of us was throwing up outside at the end of it. But now, like it just doesn't feel comfortable after various injuries. So I don't do barbell squats anymore. I used to love them, but now I'll go heavy deadlift or heavy dumbbell goblet squats because to me that's a much safer way to load the hips. And at my age, 49, almost 50, I'm not being tested. I don't have a strength coach who's going to be testing my 1RM on a heavy barbell squat like you did when you played college or played football. But now you still want to get after it. So doing a goblet squat is a safe, effective way to get after it. Be heavy so you can still feed the ego, but do it in a smart way so you're not compressing the spine or increasing any extra stress on the body. And
you said ego, and it brings me back full circle back to that yoga.
Yeah.
Because if there's ever a time where the ego gets broken, it's yoga. In my 10 forms of wealth under adventure, I always put yoga because it's an adventure when I do yoga. Yoga is not easy. People think, oh, yoga is easy. Yoga is not easy. And yoga, and when I say yoga, it could be stretching, but a devoted stretch program or yoga. I also think one of the benefits, and you talk about this on the flexibility portion, is breath, is working the breath. And one of the reasons why I'm doing more walking now than ever before is not necessarily just because of the exercise, but because it feels good to get out there and breathe and relax and kind of get mindless. And listening to a podcast, going for a nice brisk walk where typically 65% of my heart rate, and I'm getting breathless, feels good, and then go in to some strength training after that, to me is a great way to start a day.
Well, right? And I talk about that, right? Because you hit the nail on the head, Todd. I think one of the best things about the last year is the fact that we've had more time. We haven't been as rush. I know you haven't been flying as many places. I haven't been flying as many places. I've gotten back into hiking. I've started to get in love with hiking again, is because hiking is you're out in nature, you get the fresh air. There's actually, if you look at it a little metaphysical, there's a little bioenergetic sense from being in nature. There's a certain radiance. I spoke to somebody who was a naturalist up in Utah. She talked about this. There's a natural kind of energy resonance in nature that you can actually pick up on. Your body, the cells in your body can pick up on that, right? If you're into grounding, walking barefoot in the ground, it's kind of just like that, but a little exponential. So I love like a good hike. And that's the other thing that we forget about, right? Is we don't need to smash ourselves with every workout. But sometimes a good hike, 45, 50 minutes, you got a great podcast on, your legs are burning, your heart's bracing a little bit, you're breathing, you're not out of breath, but you're breathing quicker, is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, It's obvious, folks, that exercise plays a huge role in slowing down the aging process. Anything else, Pete, today when it comes to slowing down the aging process that you feel is important on today's show to share? Obviously, there's lots of different supplements. There's a lot of different opportunities to, quote, slow the aging process. Am I missing any that you'd like to share today?
Main thing is just exercise. It comes back to Todd. It comes back. There's a long word. It sounds funny. It's called mechanotransduction. That means mechanical force applied to the body creates chemical change. So when you lift a weight, you're producing new satellite cells in your body. So you're producing basically stem cells. So you don't need to fly to Europe or fly to Latin America.
I've done that too.
Well, but I mean,
I'll do anything.
Yeah, no, but you can do that, right? That you can do that, but
Totally.
just so people understand that when you lift something heavy, you're kickstarting that process naturally, right? That's all you're doing.
Yep.
So something like BFR, you're accelerating that production. If you go and get a stem cell implant, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're getting new stem cells introduced to your body. But that's the most important thing about, if you think about exercise as like you're juicing your body's own recycling plant, that's exactly what you're doing. And we mentioned this a little bit before, but look, we're heading into the football season. If you know, the best example of this is Mr. Brady down in Tampa. And I don't think you work with him, and you might buy an NDR if NDA if you do. But when you look at what Tom has done, when you look at the example he said, and then in basketball, you look at LeBron. What do these guys talk about? They don't just talk about their workouts, but they talk about the recovery protocols. They talk about getting sleep. They talk about the nutrition. And that really is. And reason why I bring up Tom and LeBron is these guys train at a high intensity on a regular basis. It's not that they just get ready for their sport. And that's the other thing. At some point, I'd love to talk to you about the history of conditioning, because now when you look at it now, and this, you're probably in the first generation of people who've really helped change this, Todd, is now athletes don't need two-a-day training camp. Yeah. Because they stay in shape all year round. Yep. Remember 20 years ago, and athletes, even NFL players, what I loved hearing, the reason why I'm bringing this up is you had Mark Rippon on your podcast not long ago. Yep. And what the thing I heard him talk about that really, what did he talk about? What they used to feed them after practice?
McDonald's.
They gave McDonald's, dude. Yeah. I mean, think of it. That wasn't that long ago.
Fries.
That was 30 years ago. Think about that mindset. Think about if you try to bring Big Macs to a football training room on a Friday before they play on a Sunday. Those guys would laugh at you and walk out, right? Because they understand that they need to fuel their body. They train at a much different level. Now, the way that athletes train, the way any professional athlete trains, they understand that they need to stay in shape all year round, and they use periodization to cycle up and cycle down. And what I try to do in the book, and what I try to do with the information I put out, whether it's my podcast or my blog, is try to get people to understand this is what the science is saying. We can look at an athlete like Brady, or we look at an athlete like LeBron. They're just an application of the science. It doesn't mean I expect my clients to be at the same level, but I try to apply the same information, because if it works for Brady to still throw bombs at 44 years old in the NFL, or for LeBron to drive the lane at 36, it can help our clients, right? It can help your clients. Your 81-year-old client can help them be a little bit fitter, get a little bit stronger today. Yeah.
So you guys listen in. I want you to think about something. When you think about aging, and no one likes it, because I started off with today like, man, it's not easy getting older. No one loves it, but there's ways and strategies that we can use to continue to feel good. I think the bottom line is we all want to feel good, want to feel better, want to look good on that. So number one, exercise is absolutely crucial to slow down the aging process. The other thing I say, number two, hydration. When you think about hydration and water intake, do you know most people are dehydrated? And I want you to realize this. If you feel dehydration, look, I know I can see you all now. You're all sipping your water because you just heard me say that. If you feel thirst, you're already 2% dehydrated. You're already 2% dehydrated if you feel thirst. So drink more water, and it's really going to help you feel better, get your energy, and yes, even slow the aging process. It's great for your skin. I talked about collagen earlier. I talked about fascia. Well, great hydration is actually going to fill up your collagen and elastin, and it's going to allow your tissues to be healthier. That's why we want to reduce even things like alcohol, which will actually dehydrate your whole system. Third aspect, and Pete mentioned this, is sleep. sleep. Well, I'm just talking basic things here: exercise, hydration, sleep. When you look at the quality of sleep, not the quantity, but the quality of sleep that you're getting, whatever it's going to take for you to be your absolute best self, sleep, the quality of sleep is good. I talk about it in my book, Get Your Mind Right. Get Your mind right. Wait, how does sleep get your mind right? Well, because when you look at REM sleep and getting in enough REM cycles to recover, that's important. And Pete talks about that as well. I've got 5 points here I want to wrap this up with. We talked a little bit about nutrition today, nutrition and supplementation. We could have a whole podcast just on this, and we have had obviously lots of those types of shows on the Impact Podcast. But when it comes to nutrition, Pete talked about HDL and LDL. You got to get rid of some of the garbage that you're eating, right? Like the fried foods. And whether you're a young kid or an athlete, it's amazing how even some athletes, despite knowing what is good food, we sometimes get bad habits and don't eat the foods that we should, that are certainly have good lean protein, that have good sources of complex carbohydrates, and yes, to have good fats, as we mentioned earlier, avocado, fish, nuts, all of these are going to be great forms of food or snack with that. And then supplementation, and you've heard me talk a lot about my routine and what I encourage to my athletes, but a supplementation routine is that, a supplementation routine. It's not the meals, it's not the food. So you might be like, yeah, I'm using the supplements you talk about, but if you're not eating right, then it doesn't matter. You've got to make sure you're A, hydrated, and B, you make the right choices. And then the other 10% is the supplement routine that you would do. And whether that be with your proteins, and I've been talking a lot lately about the collagen protein, and I've been going off on that, like it's a must, and what you must be using in your morning routine. Awesome. Do all those things. But if you're not eating right, it doesn't matter. So you got to eat right, and you've got to supplement. And the last thing is the recovery. Number 5 is just the recovery aspect of when it comes to slowing the aging process. And Pete talks about it in Ageless Intensity, is we talk about recovery, and we joked about it kind of with the different ways you can, and strategies that you can employ in your own lifestyle and routine. You have to just choose, how are you going to better recover today? Is it going to be you're going to commit to your sleep, or you're going to commit to getting more yoga in, or you're going to get an FST, fascial stretch therapy, with your local therapist and get FST, or you're going to get massage? Yes, I said massage. It's really good for our bodies right now and our minds to get massage therapy on that. Are you going to use infrared saunas or get a Juve? Whatever level you're going to use, the bottom line is that you use some forms of recovery. And it could simply be you're going to spend 10, 15 minutes at the end of your program for your flexibility and mobility. And again, if you're like, this sounds great, TD, but I don't even know where to start. Well, you've got resources, including Pete's newest book, Ageless Intensity, to check that out. Obviously, you've got other books like mine, The Impact Body Plan, and Get Your Mind Right. But Pete's Ageless Intensity certainly brings in some latest research as well. So those are just 5 ways I want to recap slowing down the aging process. And let me have it and then some. Get your mind right. Get your mind right. Maybe you can embrace the aging process, because we often fight it. Oh, I hate getting old. It's horrible getting old. My knees are hurt, or this hurts. Perhaps we can look at this as a graceful process, that how do we really move into a different season of life? And whether you're in your 40s, you're in your 50s, you're in your 70s, is we just embrace each season that we're in. And wherever we're at, we're just using different strategies to get better. Exercise, nutrition, supplementation, water, hydration, recovery, and all the things that we talked about today. Pete, any final words for today's show?
No, I love that. I love that wrap up, because you're absolutely right. I don't want to go back. Like, think about it. I don't want to be 20 something again. That's not the point. The point is we want to age. And my definition of fitness, Todd, and this is what I've used for years, fitness is having the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. So as we age, we want to be fit. You want to go out and throw a ball with your kids. You want to go out and you want to be able to go for a hike. You want to be able to go ski. You want to be able to do stand-up paddleboarding. That is, to me, that is fitness. We grew up, we're Gen X. We grew up with a generation that skateboard, snowboard, mountain bike. Everybody our age still wants to be able to enjoy those activities. It's the power to go out and enjoy your favorite activities.
Yeah.
That's what I want to help people do.
I love it. I love it. When you said you want to be in your 20s again, I want my body to feel like it's in the 20s, but I want my brain to feel like where it is now. There was an old client I used to work with. His name was Derek Smith. Derek was a middle linebacker, played 15 years in the NFL. 15 years as a middle linebacker, folks, is a long time. I'll never forget what Derek said back in the day. He said, when you're young, your body is beautiful and your brain is mush. And when you're old, your brain is beautiful and your body is mush. And peak performance happens somewhere in between. I think what all of us are after is how do we extend, right? How do we extend our body to be able to move gracefully and fit and go out there and enjoy our movements, our strength training exercises, our cardiovascular steady state exercises, to be able to hike a mountain or to go out and do some cross-country skiing or downhill skiing and enjoy life. We want to be able to extend that so that our bodies will always remain feeling good, at least we hope to, and that our brains, with all of the wisdom that we have as we get older, we can appreciate that more. So Pete, thank you for being here today. Thank you for putting this out into the world. Really excited for people to read it. Where can they pick it up?
Anywhere you buy books, Amazon, the humankinetics.com website. Human Kinetics is a publisher, so I want to say a big thank you to them. They've been great to work with. I appreciate that. There's a lot of support, but generally Amazon's the best place to pick it up. And if you like it, please leave a review. You know how that works.
Helps.
It does help. It does help it. So if you pick it up, one thing to add, really want to add, one of the things I really did with this book that I enjoyed was I use 80s movies to give examples of how the body works. Like I use Terminator, like the movie The Terminator. He's a cybernetic organism. That's like our body. Our body is a cybernetic organism. Our nervous system is the operating system. Our muscles and skeletal structures are the hardware. So that's an example. So I had fun. So as you read the book, I have a number of different 80s movies and TV shows.
Any Rocky in there?
Yes, Rocky is in there.
That's
Rocky
why you got to read it.
Rocky
of
4.
Of course it's Rocky 4.
Rocky 4 is in there, yeah.
That's why it's mandatory reading, folks. Read it. Rocky 4 is in the book. That is awesome. Pete, where can one follow you? I know you have a podcast as well. You have social media. Where can one follow you?
The podcast is all about fitness. And I like going into the science. I like talking to the researchers, the people who study this. That's how I learned about BFR, blood flow restriction, was talking to one of the main researchers of it. All about fitness, anywhere you find podcasts. That's also my Instagram tag, All About Fitness Podcast. And I have the All About Fitness Podcast YouTube channel as well, where I've started putting up more exercise how-tos. And what I'm going to be doing, Todd, is I'm actually going to be doing all the workouts in the next 2 or 3 months. I'm going to be videoing all the workouts from Smarter Workouts, my first book, and from Ageless Intensity, and putting them up on my YouTube channel. So people can go to the YouTube channel and say, and they can read the workout in the book, but then they'll be able to see the workout demonstrated on YouTube.
Folks, follow Pete McCall. Make sure you do that, especially if you love health, fitness, workouts. Check all that he's doing, especially if you love research and want to go into the science of why we do what we do. I appreciate your diligence and your detail to what you're doing as well. Everything that goes behind it. I know you put a lot of time, effort, energy into this. So I appreciate you being here today. Folks, Pete McCall, the one and only Pete McCall, Ageless Intensity. Check it out.
Thank you so much.
Down dog, breathe, breathe. Up dog, breathe. 3 nice deep breaths in. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we closing the podcast right now? I was just relaxing with some yoga. And boy, oh boy, am I excited because it is reversing the aging process. I'm going to finish with a little savasana, a little corpse pose, a little chance to breathe. But first, don't forget, do more yoga. Do more strength training. Take care of your bodies. It's the only one we are going to get. And today, don't forget to be part of our community. Yes, we have a very special new community that I want you part of. Go to my Instagram and make sure you see in the link tree a chance for you to text so you get a very special exclusive message from yours truly, not just podcast episodes, but exclusive messages because you're part of this community. Thank you for all that you do. Make sure that you go out today and that you spread the gospel of positivity, the gospel of light, and of course, the gospel of impact. Without further ado, go out there and make it a great day. Train hard, eat right, live inspired, create impact, and namaste. Hey, YouTube, thank you for watching today's show. As always, the Tighter Can Impact Show is about inspiring you to be your absolute best self. Don't forget, this is a podcast, so I want you to go and subscribe and like this show so that you don't miss a single episode.